Hello and welcome back to another update where I cover the latest developments throughout the front line in the Russo-Ukrainian war. It is your host Weep Union, and in this one we see that the Russians have managed to advance within the Kursk region in the north. In the eastern section of the front line to the south of Belorivka, the Russians also managed to expand the zone of control in the Toretsk direction. To the east of Pokrovsk in the direction of Ostyshenka, to the west of Pokrovsk towards the city itself, in the northern flank of Kursk directed to the west within Dashne, and to the northwest of Velyka Novosilka. Starting out in the Kursk region, the Russians advanced west of the Sel river line, expanding their zone of control alongside it and gaining control over a first patch along the western bank of the river line. The Russians also captured a fortified position south of Kurilovka and gained a foothold in the local settlement south of the village. The Russians are fighting alongside the forest patches and the few buildings there are along the western bank of the Sil River to expand their fighting in the direction of Guevo, where they are already occupying the first patch to the east of the town, and to expand the zone of control south of Kurilovka for a push alongside the river line towards the southern flank of Sucha. There's also reports that the Russians have started operations in the direction of Kositsa and are fighting within the town. In the southern direction, the Russians have managed to advance south of Belorivka, where they are fighting along the first patch where they're trying to get a foothold and gain control of it, along the Luhansk-Donetsk border to gain control over the western area of Belorivka, surrounding area, the fortified positions, the first patch in the high ground, to push the Ukrainians out of the Belorivka area, where they are operating within the gray zone and within the town itself. This means that the Russians do not have full control of it, and the Ukrainians are active along the fortified positions to the west of it. In the direction of Toretsk, the Russians have expanded their zone of control in the direction of Krymske, gaining full control of it, and are fighting over the Dacia area to the north of it near Dashne. The Russians also managed to gain control of the remaining parts of the industrial area and control over the waste heap right next to it. With this, the Russians have full control over the Krymske micro-district as well, and the Russians have managed to advance to the west of Toretsk, gaining control over the first patch, a significant portion of it, and the fortified positions, leaving just a small area just northeast of Shcherbinivka under Ukrainian control, and the Russians are now looking to gain full control of the last remaining parts to advance north of Shcherbinivka, gaining full control of it, and continue operations towards the reservoir to the south of the city of Constantinople. The Russians are now very close to not just gaining full control over the city of Toretsk, but to gain control over the entire surrounding area around the city itself, such as Krymske and Shcherbinivka. This will completely secure the city for the Russian forces, and with the fortified positions under their control as well, the Russian positions within Toretsk are extremely powerful, and the situation will now be very much in favor of the Russian forces going forward along the railway to the east and to the west of the city towards Constantinople, and to control the area connecting Chasiv Yar and Toretsk itself along the towns in between the two settlements, filled with fortified positions. The Russians will also like to launch operation along the high ground west of Toretsk and New York to gain control of the fortified positions along the high ground and secure the area to the west. The larger operation to the west of Toretsk is gain control of the area south of the reservoir and alongside it, cutting off the supply lines to the north of the grouping of Ukrainian forces along the fortified positions north of the city of Avdiivka, and the Russians also expanding zone of control to the west of this pocket towards Selydove and Tarasivka to the north of Baranivka. The Russians have also managed to gain control over Velyka Novosilka and are now fighting over Berezivka and the forest patch to the south of it. The Russians have managed to gain control of several fortified positions and through two separate advances, one here to the south of Velyka Novosilka yesterday and Velyka Novosilka itself today. With a combined strike from the western and southern directions, the Russians managed to gain control over the town and the fortified positions, moving into the forest patch east of the town and moving into Berezivka to the north. The Russians also advanced in the northeastern direction, northwest of Baranivka, as they moved towards Tarasivka and Selydove from the southern direction. Objective again, to cut off the supply lines in and out of the entire area, a grouping of forces of Ukrainians north of Avdiivka in between Ostyshenka to the west and Toretsk to the east. The Russians also managed to advance west of Pokrovsk in the direction of the city itself. They gained control of the fortified position along the railways and advance along the railways towards the city of Pokrovsk in the direction of the first line of defense just outside the city. To the south of Pokrovsk in the direction of Andriivka, the Russians advanced along the main highway towards the southern outskirts of the town, gaining control over the highway area and cutting off the Ukrainian forces in the southeastern parts of the town. The Russians are continuing to gain full control over the town by launching offensive operations from the northern and eastern directions. Ukrainian forces have been encircled in the eastern parts. This will lead to a weakening of the Ukrainian defenses within the town itself and will likely speed up the Russian capture of it. The Russians may also look to gain a foothold within Constantinople from the northern direction through a push through Andriivka. And with control over Andriivka, the Russians will also gain control over the northern bank of the Vovcha River line, which is now turned into a gray zone, with the Russian control of the northern bank of the Vovcha River line further north, as it is split into two different parts. The area in between the two Vovcha River lines creates a small buffer zone between the Russian forces and the Ukrainian forces within the Uklakli and the fortified positions. Within Dashna itself, the Russians advanced three separate parts over 3 different days, gaining control over the eastern parts on the 30th of January, gaining control over the grocery store and parts of the central parts on the 1st of February, and today, the 2nd of February, they can control further, and this will likely look to gain full control over Dashna within the next few days, as the Ukrainians are being pushed to the outskirts along the hospital area and the post office area in the western parts. The Russians will then gain full control of the fortified positions of Kursk and move onwards to fortified positions in between Dashna and Ulakli, and then onwards to Ulakli. And with the recent advances to the south of it, the Russians will likely expand in the northern direction as well, gaining full control over the river lines and all the way towards Constantinople, with the Russians at the outskirts of Constantinople from the south and Andriivka in the north. The Russians will also likely gain full control of Constantinople fairly quickly, with the flanks exposed in the northern and southern directions, from which they can expand towards Rusliv from the northern, eastern, and southern directions. Attacking it from multiple directions will also allow that to fall quickly, and the Russians will likely expand their zone of control to include Andriivka, Constantinople, and Rusliv within the next week or two. The Russians also advanced northwest of Velyka Novosilka, gaining control over the remaining parts of the river line area. This happened on the 30th of January. This happens in preparation for the Russian forces to start attacking the fortified position to the northwest of Velyka Novosilka, with the advance along the road west of Vremivka towards Novosilka, and with the advances in the northern direction to expand the zone of control and their flank in that direction, allows Russians to have a secure flank ahead of a battle over the fortified positions, and also to attack them from their weak point. We're seeing across the entire front line, the Russians are launching several offensive operations right now. This has slightly changed from a couple of months ago. The Russians have now gained control of Velyka Novosilka, Kursk, several areas in between Pokrovsk and Kursk, attacking in the direction of Vostyshenka, where they gain control of the town and fighting over the intersection and the supply lines. The Russians also gain full control over Toretsk and are fighting around the city there. The Russians are nearing full control over Chasiv Yar, and with new offensive operations taking place east of Siversk, which are much safer and using different tactics than was previously reported. This means that they are not attempting the same thing, but they're changing to new tactics, which could provide a different outcome. And we're seeing that with the current situation, we can see that the situation is likely going to speed up for the Russian forces all the way from Chasiv Yar and down south to the southwestern outskirts of the Toretsk region, as the Russians have captured a lot of the fortified positions and strongholds of the Ukrainians in the area, leaving little resistance remaining in the Ukrainian held territory in that direction. While we may also see the first movement in the Siversk direction in many months, if not years, of stalemates. Same time, we have not seen a lot of movement in the Kharkiv-Luhansk region. We may see a reorganization of the Russian forces, and we see another offensive by the Russians as they start making gains in the Kursk region yet again. So we may see some captures by the Russians in the coming weeks. In conclusion, we can see that the primary objective of the Russians is to battle Pokrovsk in the coming weeks, as we see the Russians are finishing up the flanks of Pokrovsk itself, and this will allow the Russians to redirect much of their forces towards the siege of the city and continue in that direction. While the Russians also looking to clear up the remaining parts around Toretsk, Constantinople, Kursk, Velyka Novosilka and Siversk to improve their positions towards a siege of Constantinople at the same time as the siege of Pokrovsk. And that is going to be all for this update. Thank you all for watching. Make sure to leave a like, subscribe, check out my Patreon and YouTube membership for additional content. Thank you all for watching and have a great day.